April 17, 1966, Portage County. It's 5 a.m., and in the pre-dawn darkness, Manaway Police Chief Gerald Buchert is patrolling his small village. He's driving down State Route 44, while most of the 1,200 people he's paid to serve and protect are snug in their beds. Suddenly, the police radio crackles. His law enforcement counterparts in Summit County are talking to the Portage County Sheriff's dispatcher. Mrs. Harry Hayes in Akron has reported a brightly lit object, as big as a house, flying over her neighborhood. The object was too low to be a plane, too high to be a street light, but it was headed east, toward Portage, so deputies might want to be on the lookout for some strange activity in the sky. Buchert looks around, and, son of a gun, there is a strange light in the southeast. He scurries back home to get his camera, wakes his wife and coaxes her into a bathrobe, then hurries her to the backyard so he has another witness. The saucer-shaped object is near them now. Buchert can see it has a dome-shaped top, and beneath it, a funnel of light shooting to the ground. Buchert lifts his camera, a Brownie Starmite 120, and snaps 3 photos before the object moves away into the night. 18 miles away, Portage County deputies Dale Sparr and Barney Neff are in the midst of their shift. A couple hours earlier, the 2 men had responded to a single car accident on State Route 183 near Atwater Center. A car had sheared a utility pole. They drove the driver to the hospital, had the car towed, then waited for an Ohio Edison man to come fix the pole. While they are chatting with a lineman, they hear the radio traffic between Portage and Summit counties, the same chatter that had caught the attention of Buchert. They crack a few jokes. Then the officers head down State Route 224 toward the office to make out their report on that accident. Along the way, they spot a car abandoned by the side of the road between Randolph and Atwater. It's a rusty 1950 white Ford. They pull over to investigate. The vehicle is filled with what appears to be radio equipment, and, painted on the side, a triangle with a lightning bolt and the words 7 steps to hell. As they ponder this strange find, they hear a humming. Sparr later compares it to the sound of an overloaded transformer. The 2 deputies turn toward the sound and see, rising in the air behind a row of trees, a saucer-shaped craft. At first, Sparr is mildly surprised. "Well, that must be the UFO that's been talked about," he says. The object rises higher, then turns and moves toward them. It's about 50 feet long and 20 feet high, perhaps 250 feet away and 100 feet off the ground. A bright blue-white light is shining from the bottom, so brilliant it makes Sparr's eyes water. For a moment, Sparr thinks the ground might be on fire. It's not, but now Sparr and Neff are petrified. Sparr, a 35-year-old former Air Force gunner, literally can't move at first. He focuses on his foot, willing it to move, just to assure himself it can. Then he makes eye contact with Neff, and the 2 run for their car and jump in. Sparr radios in to report the UFO. At dispatch, Sergeant Henry Schoenfeld tells them to keep an eye on the thing. He'll send someone with a camera. Sparr and Neff continue to follow the UFO, sometimes reaching speeds of nearly 100 miles per hour, on rural roads where there is next to no traffic. Sparr tells anyone listening to him on the police band that the thing is lighting up the road so brightly they don't even need their headlights. The UFO, meanwhile, is acting like it wants attention. When Sparr makes a wrong turn at an intersection that takes him away from the craft, the saucer changes its course, goes back toward the cruiser, and waits for them to catch up. Throughout the chase, whenever Sparr has to slow down through a residential area or for a traffic light, the craft slows down. The sun is rising now, and the deputies have a better look at it. They report what they see, a projection in the back, like an 18-foot-long antenna. They describe the exterior as having a satiny metallic finish. To stay with the ship, the deputies have to leave Portage County. They follow it into Mahoning County. And when they reach Columbiana County, a new officer joins the chase. Officer Wayne Houston of the East Palestine Police Department is monitoring the radio broadcasts. He checks his maps and moves his car to Route 14 to intercept the racing deputies. Then he spots the UFO with the deputies right behind. He falls into line behind both of them and joins the pursuit. Within minutes, all three of the officers are crossing the state border, entering Pennsylvania on Route 51, the saucer leading the way. They have moved beyond the range of the Portage County Area Police Band, so a station in Lisbon, Ohio, begins logging the radio activity. When word reaches the Pennsylvania State Police in Chippewa, they call Pittsburgh air traffic to see if anything is on the radar. They are told no, nothing out of the ordinary. Meanwhile, Portage County wants its deputies back. They've traveled 86 miles, far from their jurisdiction. The radio operator in Lisbon passes the message on to Sparr and Neff. Their cruiser is running low on fuel anyway, so they pull off into a service station in Conway, Pennsylvania. There they are met by Conway policeman Frank Panzanella. Panzanella is off duty and had been heading home when he saw what he thought was a burning airplane. The object looked like it was on a collision course with him. He even maneuvered his cruiser sharply when he thought the thing was going to hit him. Once over his initial panic, he saw it wasn't a burning airplane. To him, the object looked like a bisected football, a funnel of glaring illumination coming out of the bottom, and that aerial attachment in the back. Panzanella had just pulled off into the service station when Sparr and Neff arrived, and so Sparr and Neff from the Portage County Sheriff's Office, Officer Houston from East Palestine, and Officer Panzanella from Conway stand together at the gas station. That's when they hear the chatter about aircraft being scrambled. Soon after, the men see jet vapor trails and watch as fighter jets move in the early morning sky in a direction to intercept the UFO. The jets are coming from the west, but as the jets near the object, the saucer accelerates. It rises straight into the sky like it was pulled by a cord and disappears. A day later, the UFO and the chase are international news. As it turns out, law enforcement officers were not the only ones watching it. Police departments along the Ohio and Pennsylvania border logged hundreds of calls from people. Reporters from every compass point make their way to Portage County. Buchert's family would later describe it as several days of living hell. Buchert knew the naysayers would be out in force, so he quickly got his film developed. Only one of the 3 photos revealed anything, but the one that did showed a saucer-shaped shadow in the dark sky, his cruiser right below it. He was holding the print when he called the Cleveland office of the FBI to report what he had. They put him in touch with Major Hector Quintanilla at the Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Dayton. Quintanilla heads the Air Force's Project Blue Book, a program the Pentagon put together to research UFOs. They operated from 1952 to 1969, investigating any and all strange sightings with a mission of determining what they were, whether they posed a threat, and if they are legitimate, what technology we could learn from them. But Quintanilla, from all accounts, hates his job. He was assigned to the work as punishment for defying a superior. He had no patience for people that he described as having ceased to live in our real world. So Buchert doesn't know it, but the chief is not going to find a fan in Quintanilla. And when Quintanilla asks Buchert to send him the original negative of his UFO picture, Buchert dutifully sends it off, but keeps the print he had made. Quintanilla follows up with a call to the Portage County Sheriff's office, where he can't conceal his distaste. He starts by asking Sparr, "So tell me about this mirage you saw." As Sparr tries to tell him, Quintanilla cuts the deputy off and asks, "Did you have this thing in view for more than a few minutes?" After Sparr says, "Heck yeah, we chased it for miles," Quintanilla loses interest and ends the conversation. Shortly afterward, Quintanilla issues a news release to the media. Buchert's photo, he says, was simply a processing defect. And what the officers were really chasing was the planet Venus, distorted by atmospheric conditions. He also denies that fighter jets had been sent to check it out. In general, people believe Quintanilla over Sparr, who is the only guy willing to publicly defend the incident to reporters. Within a couple of days of the media onslaught on Portage County, every other witness has clammed up. So when things go south very fast for the lawmen who witnessed this thing, Sparr is going to bear the brunt of it. In Manaway, Chief Buchert is convinced everyone is looking at him funny. He has to be talked out of handing in his resignation. And although he kept a scrapbook of every newspaper article written on the topic, he refused to discuss it again. When reporters reach out to him months after the event for a follow-up, he turns them away. Sheriff's Deputy Neff goes into seclusion. His wife tells reporters her husband was almost in a state of shock after it happened, and now people are making fun of him. She said he told her, "If that thing landed in my backyard, I wouldn't tell a soul." In East Palestine, Officer Wayne Houston leaves the department and moves west. He said he quit because he was tired of people making fun of him. The city officials didn't like police officers chasing UFOs, he told a reporter who found him driving a bus in his new life. He changed his name and started going by his middle name to cut back on the ability of people to find him. And in Pennsylvania, Officer Frank Panzanella refused to be interviewed. His friends told reporters he even had his telephone removed to keep it from ringing. Sparr, on the other hand, stood by his story and repeated it. But Sparr is also unique in this story for another reason. He's the only one to have seen the UFO a second time. It was 2 months after the first encounter. Deputies knew civilians were monitoring their broadcasts, so they agreed if the UFO were ever spotted again, the department would refer to it as Floyd, That was Dale Sparr's middle name. And sure enough, one evening in June, Dale was driving east on Interstate 80 when he looked up, and there it was. He whispered into the radio, "Floyd's here with me." Then he parked the car, lit a cigarette, and stared at the floor of the cruiser for 15 minutes, refusing to look out the window. When he finally looked up 15 minutes later, Floyd was gone. For months after that, Sparr's life was in shambles. A reporter found him living in a motel in Solon. He'd lost his wife, his home, his job. He lost 40 pounds and was living on one bowl of cereal and one sandwich a day. In his last known interview, he said, "I have become a freak. I'm so damn lonely. Look at me. 34 years old, and what do I have? Nothing. To everyone, I'm just Dale Sparr, the nut who chased a flying saucer." There is one other person who affected this story. His name was Dr. J. Allen Hynek, and he was an astronomy professor at The Ohio State University. Quintanilla often used him as a consultant, figuring it would be better to have a man of science debunk some of these sightings. Hynek did not disbelieve in UFOs. He thought there was potential, so he took reports of sightings very seriously. This led to tension between the astronomer and the Air Force major, since Quintanilla wanted everything quashed, and quashed fast. Quintanilla was afraid there were so many witnesses to this UFO sighting that Hynek wouldn't be willing to dismiss it quickly, and so he never consulted with him. When word of this emission gets out, Quintanilla is under pressure to do a proper investigation. He has to go back to Portage County and conduct full interviews with Chief Buchert in Manaway and Deputies Sparr and Neff in Ravenna. Transcripts were kept. In the interview at the Portage County Sheriff's Office, Quintanilla keeps alternating between theories of Venus and that of a runaway weather balloon. But Sheriff Dustman stood by his men. Professor Hynek, by the way, later moved to Chicago and founded the Center for UFO Studies. In 1976, he was hired as a consultant by a then new and upcoming Ohio-born director by the name of Steven Spielberg. Spielberg was filming a new movie about a UFO. He wanted to use a classification term that Hynek had coined. Hynek's system called a general UFO sighting a close encounter of the first kind. The second kind meant there was physical evidence. A close encounter of the third kind was contact. Spielberg's blockbuster movie, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, includes a scene at the beginning of the movie that shows police officers speeding along a rural road, chasing a UFO. That, it's been reported, was an homage to the Great UFO Chase in Portage County.
Thank you for watching Ohio Mysteries. If you appreciate the effort, please hit the subscribe button down below if you haven't already. Ohio Mysteries also has a podcast with nearly 300 stories in our catalog. Find those on your favorite podcast app or visit ohiomysteries.com for the entire episode list.